Hi there, this truck with pocket snakes. So I'm going to show you, I'm building a matched pair of 275 snake whips that are 4 feet long. So the first step is I cut 2 5-foot pieces of a color that I'm going to be using in the whip. In this case, black. And the 5 feet is, I want to make 2 foot long doubled or eyes, little mini English eyes, but I'm going to double 2 pieces of I'm going to double the 275 paracord into an English eye on one end. So the first step is you have to get rid of the nylon paracord guts out of the center. Then this is a Tandy leather needle, Permalock needle it's called, internally threaded. It's about 2 inches long and it's got a little flat diamond head. And it has no burrs. Now you can sand this down, make this job a little easier, but this is just I wanted to try it with one that I hadn't cut down. Cut your 275 paracord off into a sharp point like so. And then we're going to heat that up and we're going to quick spin it and see if we can get it to stick in the needle. So I'm screwing the Permalock needle to make the smallest paracord needle you pretty much can. That's not actually true. You can use stainless steel. You can use stainless steel number 14, 16, 18 gauge screw-on insertion needle things that are a solid post that are internally threaded for even finer cordage work. They're used for installing body jewelry and stuff, but this is just a Tandy leather small. So this is 6 inches and I'm offsetting from here to here, which the needle also is a couple inches, so it's like 8-inch offset. Find the off center bite, and then I'm going to insert and work this needle inside the 275 paracord. And then I'm just going to kind of shuck this whole thing slowly. You can see you're forming a loop. And I get questions as to why I do it this way. Well, that way at the very core you have 4 layers of fabric, or 2 sheaths pulled through themselves of the 275 core. It leaves a nice loop as a standing end, and when you sew it into the material I use for a core, it is the right size to do so. And I make this look easier than it probably is, but I've also done this a lot. And you may end up having to cut a diagonal and snip it several different times. But for a 4-foot whip, for this design, you need 2 foot with an English eye on the end. You want a small English eye, and so when I get to the end here, you'll see the difference in the 275 paracord. Will be really close to coming out even. I'm going to unscrew it here, and I'm going to shuck it back towards this eye. So I like the eye to be about the size of a pencil. It can be smaller, but the smaller it is, if anything shifts, you're going to have some issues. I'm going to shuck it back down. And so this is over 2 feet right now, but there's 1, 2, about 3 or 4, so there's 4.5 inches offset. So I only needed about a 4-inch difference, but it doesn't really matter because this piece is going to get chopped down to be right at 2 feet. So we're going to do the same to the other side. I'm going to cut this one off at about a 45-degree angle. Anything longer than that, you're likely to get burrs. And when you pull it through, if there's any burrs, they'll let you know by catching and grabbing hold of the material and causing you all sorts of grief. So burrs are not what you want. And this is a little torch that's refillable, so I don't go through as many lighters. It also lets you apply heat very, very precisely. And anytime you're dealing with hot plastic, liquid plastic, which is what I'm rolling between my fingers, you want to keep it moving. And if it's good nylon, it won't stick to your skin. It'll roll and you won't burn yourself. There's 2 forms of nylon. There's nylon 6 and nylon 12. And nylon, one of them will stick to skin a lot better. So you can use this technique to create 275 paracord falls that will be longberry spliced, which is technically what this is a longberry splice for a standing eye, as opposed to a Brummel slice where you cross pin it so it doesn't, so you can't open it up or close it up. But the key to this is you have to be patient. You can't pull too much on the end coming out of the needle because it may pop off the needle and then you're just fighting it for an extended period of time. But I'm going to try and film installing this and sewing it into the shop bag. Now on this design, I've got a lot of ways to make whips. I use a lot of different techniques. But in this one, it's more of a lance style whip. So it's got a 3/8 inch piece of slinker cord that I can load full of steel shot. You could use lead, but lead is toxic long term and you don't need the lead dust in your workspace. Tungsten's a good option if you want more weight than steel. I'm just going to shot load it with steel. I do tungsten shot loading. I try and avoid ever using lead. but you can do what you wish. Okay, I've pulled the needle in that end out. I'm going to shuck it to the other end. I'm going to make sure I have it about the same size as this one. Pretty close. Pretty much perfect. Stick an object in the eye and pull it the other direction. I'm going to untwist the needle from the end. Put your fingernail into it. Now, I'm not going to use this needle to install it because I'm sticking this piece into, I'm going to sheath over this. So I'm going to go to a bigger needle. So this is a stainless steel 3mm needle. A little flatter than 45 tends to work better for 275 with these needles. That way it creates a shelf. And you spin it. So I just measured 2 feet. 2 feet is right here. Now this is a silver, metallic silver Sharpie, so I can see where that silver is. When you're doing matched pairs of things, you try and get it as close as possible. So I'm going to mark right in between those two. That way it's got both marks on both, and right in the middle is where I'm going to cut. Now, I'm not going to cut it right this second. So this is a whipmaker cord. It's 3/16 inch whipmaker cord. It's 1/2 millimeter thick and about 3.5 millimeters wide. I'm going to measure out 9 inches roughly. I'm going to cut an angle on this. I'm going to come down. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and create a bump, seal the diagonal end. So this is the one I welded the end. I'm going to pull the 275 inside of this cord from the flat end. And then up here, right at the end before it diagonals, pull this through. Okay, you see how there's the two silver marks? I'm going to cut it right in between those two. And I'm going to just poke it back through the sheath, shuck the sheath down. This needle on. This end is welded. Pull it through. There's our two silver marks. Cut right in between those two. Check that into place. So now I'm going to simply screw this end on. Now this is pressed flat material, so you want to align the flat shape with the flat shape. You want to pull this over sheath. So I want this sheath to be right at the same length. A little bit too much material. I'm going to cut this at an angle. The scissors are kind of dull. Okay, cut this square. I'm going to pull this assembly through this assembly. So one advantage of layering pressed flat material is you create a natural bias that at the very core gives it an ever so slight oval shape. And if you don't want a slightly oval shaped whip, then you want to use something that isn't pressed flat, because that's the natural result. Okay. Okay, so this is about 3 finger widths from the end and about 6 3/4 of the way. So I'm going to try and make the other one match. And whenever you're making matched pairs, you want this to be as consistent as you can at every level of detail. That way everything's, you know, within 5 grams or so overall, and the length is spot on, and the balance is identical, so you can't distinguish the whips from one another, theoretically. I can still usually tell which one was left and right, or 1 and 2. But I'm a perfectionist, and most people are not. So this one is 1/4 inch too long. Note to self, keep the fingers out of the way and don't cut through the 275 core, because that'll ruin your day. You want to kind of compact this as you go. So right now we have 5 layers, or 4 layers. That one has 5. And this is just the cracker anchor. And I haven't plated anything. I'm using plated material, but I haven't plated anything yet. Okay. There's 3 fingers and 6 fingers. Okay. This is 3/8 slinker cord in black. 4.5 feet, roughly. So each of these English eye assemblies have 5 layers, and you can feel the bump for where there's all 5 layers. So to start with, I put these 6 inches up. So we want to start down here. Same idea, this is flat pressed material, so I want to put the orientation of the flat against the flat. We're going to pop out. Okay, so I found the end of the 275 doubled is right there. We cut through all 5 layers. And it's just a black whatever. And I'm going to just pull that through, and then I'm going to push it back so that the hole that I made with the needle is just a hair low. Okay, so this is a piece of bonded black text, like, I don't know, 137, pretty heavy upholstery kind of thread, but it's bonded nylon. And it's just pulled through, and this is a doll needle, but it's a short doll needle. So I'm pinning through the 5 layers here, and then this is a 6th layer. So I'm pinning through all of that. Try not to jam yourself with the needle, because nobody needs to be pokey. Then you weld the end of the thread. Okay. Then you turn this over, and you go through all six layers. So 6 layers and 6 layers. This is like 12-layer sandwich here. But by turning it over, it makes a loop with 2 pieces of double thread base, 2 pieces of thread. So when you cinch it up, it grabs hold. You turn this over again. And where it came out, you go back in. What these loops do is if you're pulling on just the center, it tends to grab and create more friction. And with this thread, if you hit a ceiling fan or catch it on something, it's more likely to give way than to hold on. But with 3 stitches and 3 wraps, it does a pretty good job of holding the assembly together. Plus, the end of this assembly down here is a plug to plug the shot to keep the shot in place. Okay, so now it's welded there, and it's welded up here, and there's 1, 2, 3, and it goes 1, 2, 3 stitches. And it has a minimal bump. There's almost none, plus we're going to have multiple layers of this. So this is super fine steel shot, like super fine, finer than table salt. It's S330 medium, which is a sandblasting stainless steel, or you can buy it as high carbon steel, whichever you prefer. And this is a copper tube from Ace Hardware or a similar hardware store made by K&S Metals. This is a copper tube that is 5/16. And I'm putting it inside of this is a 3/8 sheath. Now, one thing when you're using something as fine as sandblasting medium, if you don't want it to leak out of the tube, out of the fabric tube, you have to take the time to have multiple sheaths, or you have to hot soak it in like a self-healing wax. Okay, so I have cinched it down to where that tube and the plug meet. So this is a ketchup bottle, and it's full of like 3 or 4 pounds of fine steel in here. And I've cut the top off to be a reasonable fit for the tube. You can hear it running, or I can hear it running. And your fingertips will tell you when the steel gets up there, because the steel is cooler than the copper. The copper will transfer the heat to your fingers. It tells you that it's full. And you try not to leak out any steel out onto the floor. And then you shuck this back so that you have a loose sheath, and you gently start bouncing. And you're packing that steel shot into this fabric. Now it's a 3-foot long tube filled full of steel shot. And when you get done packing this, it will be close to 2 feet long. May not be perfect. Because you can only pack it so tight. But this is how I go about it. If you find a better way to do this, let me know. But I've tried BBs, I've tried a lot of different medium. This very fine steel is a consistent product I can buy, and I can pick it up with a magnet off the floor. Okay, I have now officially run out of stuff. Sorry. And the nice part is, since this piece is 2 feet, I need to mark it here. You break out your silver, you pin it like so. Then you take your container, put the tube back in. Then you lift and pour back all but maybe an inch above. Okay. And then you can continue to pack this down. And try and get it perfect if you want. but it's pretty well packed in there. Okay. And this is a Tandy Permalock brass needle. It's got the internal threads, and I've sanded this down from a diamond point to be just kind of an oval point. Don't want any burrs. And take this assembly and pull it through another assembly. Keeping the two layers lined up to keep that bias even. This layer you can just kind of shimmy down by hand. The next layer, I have a hard time photographing it, but I put on another layer while it's hanging from a hook and pull a third layer over this. I'm going to get these first two steps. This adds some compression and starts to create some internal tension as well, which is kind of fun. It's kind of a crazy way to build a core, but it's a very precise and consistent way to build a core. You guys, I'm sure, all have different techniques. Okay, so this is the end of the last sheath, and we're 8 inches, maybe almost 9 inches. Pull it down till I'm 9 inches past. You'll notice that that makes it so it's right about halfway to the end. And the next one will be halfway in between these. But I'm going to bring them both up to date. So one thing you can do if you want to save on frustration is you can put a pin in the fabric so you don't pull a wrinkle too far to be able to shuck it back. This is 18 inches, which then can be shot loaded and turned into a keychain cord or a shop bag of some sort for something. So I'm always trying to come up with ways to not waste stuff, but rather make good use of stuff. So don't grab the needle, it's sharp. So we're shucking it all the way back up to the top and checking all the way down to the bottom. Pulling the needle. Now, I like to have a couple feet on this one because that way it can go over the 18 inches once I cut this off. I'm going to cut this one square at the end. And then this will be ready for bolstering. Okay. Grabbing my 4.5 foot strip, and we're going to do the same thing. So go 6 inches. People wonder why I spend so much time paying attention in detail. It's because I want it to be identical, or as close to it as I can get. And I fail constantly because my idea of perfection's unattainable, but I'm always pursuing perfection. It's part of the joy of this. It's an outlet to be perfectionistic that doesn't hurt anybody and annoys very few people, and also people that appreciate what I do like the end result. Okay. Same routine, we're going to pierce and go through all 12 layers, 6 layers on one side, 6 layers on the other side, and anchoring it. Scoop. Rotate it away from me. Or towards me, one way or the other. I throw out 12 layers. All 12 layers. And all 12 layers. So there's two welds about 1/4 inch apart with 3 stitches and 3 wraps. Stick 5/16 tube or 3/16 tube. Now for paracord, if you're using paracord, you have to use a 5/32 tube, and usually an aluminum tube if you're going to pack that size, something small enough to go inside. And then you can do the same with smaller cordage, but you also have to be cognizant of how the size of the particles or the BB size is, how that does. Press it down and start packing. I'm just bouncing this up and down while keeping my fingers sort of around the loose bag. This isn't as much of a shot load as it looks like, because it's like, I don't know, maybe 3 ounces or 4 ounces of fine steel shot. So if it were lead, it would be half a pound in that same space. But when you switch to steel shot, everything's got to get, you have to have enough room to pack in enough material. Okay. That is pretty close. And you can spend a lot of time trying to get perfectly compacted stuff, but you can only adjust it so much, because the beads want to pack how they want to pack. With this stuff, if you count to 3 real slow, it's less likely to scald you or burn you, because there's a lot more, because it's bigger and thicker than paracord is. But with the shot can go back. Done with sewing, so the needle can go back. Chuck the second layer. Like I said, there's a third layer that goes over the top of this that goes further down. That third one has to be hung from a hook, and you're pulling almost your body weight to get that third layer on. So you have to gauge how much compaction you want, how much tension you want to pack into a core before you bolster it, before you plait over it, before you add a layer of hand plating or a belly. And in this case, with this whip, there'll be 2 bellies and then an overlay on a 4-footer, which is probably overkill. But because of the nature of this whip and its length, and the fact it's more of a lance shape, so it doesn't have a real wide, it has a ball, but then it's pretty even. The shot bag is even, and then it tapers down at the end into an English eye. In order to create a smoother taper over the top, so the whip has a beautiful tapered section, I'll plate half or a third of the whip, 2/3 of the whip, and then the whole overlay. And I'll probably do the plating on each of those hand-plated bellies. I'll probably do all of that plating on these two whips in and I went too far. But that's okay. We will survive. You can always cut something shorter. You can't cut it longer. So, and you probably want to ask, have I ever cut through the core? And the answer is yeah. I've made that mistake before, but not recently. Much like dropping strands and cut the wrong one off. Suddenly you got to undo the whole whip and put a new overlayer. Okay, I'm going to put a pin in it. Pull the and since it's a fabric material, this is about 18 inches, so we can use that for a keychain shot load. And the neat part is it's already sealed on one end, see? It's already welded, and then you can pull a couple, 2 or 3 sheaths and hot soak it in wax, and then that shot is not going anywhere. And if you want a really limber whip, you could just have 2 layers. But like down here, where we had 6 layers, now we have 7 layers or 14. It's a sandwich of 14 layers thick. And then right here it drops to 6 or 12 layers thick. Right here so it drops in stages all the way down. So but there are 2 cores that are ready to be so that's the start. I'm going to come back, and I don't know if I'll be able to take this whip, so this is a whip I'm working on currently, down to put these 2 layers on. So I'm shooting these in stages, but people wanted to see the whole process. It's like, I'm happy to share my process. If you want to use my crazy construction techniques to make a pocket snake that is a quality construction that'll last you for years, feel free. Mind you, it's more work than a simple construction, but I use it because it's what it produces the result I want. At the end of the day, having the end result in the whip is that behaves the way I want it to roll, moves in motion the way I want, and has an even bias, so bias on both sides of the whip, so the roll can be kept in plane easier for a snake whip. It's all these little nuances that matter. So anyway, this chuck with pocket snakes, I'm gonna leave that for now, and I'll come back to this matched pair here in a bit.